Good evening. I'm Professor Erica Walker, and on behalf of my colleagues and co-organizers, Madhavi Chatterjee and Amy Stewart Wells, and all of us here at Teachers College, I want to welcome you to the last event of the Edmund W. Gordon Centennial Conference, inspired by and in honor of our beloved professor, friend, and mentor who turns 100 this month. Happy birthday, Dr. Gordon. Thanks to all of you so much for joining us over the last 2 days and for coming to this virtual closing ceremony tonight. It's been a marvelous time, and if you've missed anything at all, I hope you'll visit the conference website to view all of the previous sessions. All of these were recorded and are great opportunities to learn about Dr. Gordon's ideas, vision, research, and legacy, and to also hear how researchers, policymakers, and educators in the field are applying and building on his work for the betterment of education and society. Our closing ceremony this evening features remarks from Dr. Gordon, reflections by supporters and funders of Dr. Gordon's work, and tributes from family, friends, colleagues, and students. We'll open the evening's festivities with a poem from the great Haki Madhubuti. Dr. Madhubuti, thank you for being here.
I'm really happy to be here. Dr. Gordon is one of my heroes, and Susan Gordon, she was one of my heroes also. She rose, and he chose Third World Press to publish his memoirs, and Volume 1, Pedagogy, Imagination, the Concept of Memory, Volume 2, all right, and they're all in print. Volume 3. You can notice on all of the volumes you have the great artists, Brother White, and then of course we just published last year Human Variance and Assessment for Learning, and we're looking forward to. I was contacted last week about another volume he's working on, so we'll see. I'm going to read a poem, but I want to thank Dr. Gordon for coming to us because he could have went anywhere. We're independent Black publishers in Chicago, Illinois. We're 50, which is our 54th year, be 55 next year. And for Dr. Gordon's and your information, I'm changing leadership. We have a new publisher, Dr. Romy Crawford. The publisher is Dr. Michael Samunga, and he's in Atlanta. The new president of the company is Dr. Romy Crawford here in Chicago. And the new director of the Institute Foundation is Dr. Lasana Kazembe, and he's in IUPUI in Indianapolis. So we're moving just as Dr. Gordon is moving. And I want to read this poem to open up. And this poem was actually also for the memory of his dear wife, Dr. Susan Gordon. The title of the poem, and it's in my new book, Taught by Women. Okay, and all the poetry in here is dealing at some point with women. Okay, and the title of the poem is Native Country in the Person of One. And the book is really dedicated to women who've been part of my life over the last 50 years. Gwilym Brooks, but also you might recognize my wife when she was giving me instructions about 45 years ago, maybe 50, I'm not even sure how this picture was taken. Anyway, here's the poem. Weaponized ignorance legitimizes the unknowing of self. The inability to decode negatives is a result of unchained education and on afterburners, whips, and muskets. A questioning man is as dangerous as hot sauce on pancakes. It is the unknown ideas of why and a manifest mission of the enslavers who drive the inquiring men, women to ponder, enlist, and force open the field doors, books, and secrets of white-only water fountains. Keep out fear makers, ghost separatists, culture, wealth hoarders, and gun scientists. What is the pedagogy of the upward poor? To locate their authentic minds, to impede the cycle of landlessness, hunger, and unconsciousness, to know the profound distinction between yes, yeah, and yes, a boss, to realize that kindness and empathy are not weaknesses, but character, to conclude that knowledge acquisition is not global or assured, to deduct the loss of insects, birds, mammals, and South and North Poles is evidence that we are killing our planet, to confirm that Black, brown, and people of color cultures are answers and not the problem. In a life knocking the hell out of a century with a history of breathing the same pages as Dubois, Locke, wife Susan, in the thinking, ownership, and rulership classes of the world, you are able to still swim fish-like with local and world museums, inventorying the deadly landscapes of European supremacy and witness the articulation and architecture of alien rule, denial, genocide, and white ascendancy as you issue your own notice of war, reconstruction, clear language, and study. Still stroking at 98, at 100, with Black vision, wisdom, and right steps. Indeed, Reverend Dr. You do us proud and will be recorded from jubilant congregations of all sacred texts that you, native country son, done good, real good, and still daily unlocking lost and discovered pages of our precious texts. Thank you, Dr. Gore. We appreciate you and love you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful work.
Thank you.
And now we'll hear from Dr. Gordon, who will give remarks. Professor?
Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you. It was beautiful. And thank you, friends. I'm not certain that I can find the words with which to thank you appropriately. I'll have to ask your apology as I read my remarks. To tell you the truth, I'm doing pretty well at 100, but I'm no longer as certain of my memory that I can make it through a talk without copious notes. I get started on a sentence these days and sometimes forget what I started out to say. But anyway, thank you. I think I need to say thank you to three people who have been very active in the putting together of this wonderful event here at Teachers College. Erica and Madhabi and Amy, thank you very much. And while I'm saying thank you, from the beginning of the planning of doing something to commemorate my 100 years, Kenji Hakuda has been kind of coordinating things. I have to confess, I've been a part of the planning. I suppose it's in part egotistical, but from the beginning, Kenji and I decided that we weren't celebrating as much as we were trying to organize a series of work sessions. We want to deepen the footprints of all of us who have been a part of my journey. My former colleagues, my former students, certainly my family, my late wife. We've been trying to do the work of social justice. And in the planning that Kenji has coordinated, we've been planning events around the country, probably at 12 different university campuses. Folk who claim that I helped them along the way are coming together in events not as elaborate as the one here at Teachers College, but events that revisit various aspects of our work over these years. And I say not as much to celebrate as it has been to try to underscore, to deepen the footprints in the expectation that even though I won't be around much longer, as long as you are, we hope the work will continue. If you look at today, yesterday and today's agenda, it's kind of jam full of stuff. And it's only a part of the work that I've done over the years. As I'm reminded of it, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a good friend. Oh, it was maybe 50 years ago. I was well into my career, but it was a long time ago. She was a very prominent member of the educational research community. And she said to me, Ed, you're doing a lot of interesting things. Some of it, she said, is uniquely insightful. But she added, you're all over the place. You're trying to do too much. You got too many different things going on. If you want to make your mark as a research scientist, you need to single out a problem and dig more deeply. Select the good research questions, she said, and drill down into it. I think you have real promise, but you need to focus, she said. As I look at all the stuff I've been about, I wonder what she would say now. If you look at the stuff I've tried to do, it's obvious that I didn't take her advice. Some of the areas I've tried to study or do something about include school desegregation. I used to write about the nature-nurture controversy. You've probably heard about my work in early childhood education, primarily with Head Start. I think I coined the term compensatory education. And with one of my mentors, Dr. Wilkerson, we wrote a book on that. I've written about career education. I've got a book on supplementary. Larry Kremen preferred to call it comprehensive. We can call it comprehensive supplementary, complementary. comprehensive and supplementary education. I've written about expanding academic canons. I've written about remediation in higher education, student academic development, and affirmative development, a take on affirmative action. And as you know from this conference, here in my 100th year, I have for 10 years been trying to repurpose educational assessment. My esteemed friend was correct those many years ago. I've been all over the place. I've done a bit on a lot of different issues. Actually, I've been eclectic and parasitic. Somebody, I think yesterday, talked about, used the metaphor of snowball. You know, as it rolls down the hill, it gets bigger and bigger because it collects more and more stuff, more and more snow. At a later point in my career, I received a different kind of guidance from an equally distinguished scholar and friend. He and I were having lunch one day, and he said, "Ed, I used to worry about what you'll come up with next. You always got some different idea. Your well of ideas seemed inexhaustible. Then I read your book, Pedagogical Imagination, and I finally got to the point. I got the point. Man, Don said, man, you really have only one or two ideas. You just keep pushing them in different clothing." Don was right. For all of my career, the continuing thread has been the struggle for social justice, to expand the opportunities to learn with adequate support for disadvantaged learners, who are, by the way, a very, very diverse population of learners. Yes, I have been all over the place, but my core agenda is the pursuit of social justice, primarily through appropriate and sufficient opportunities for all children, and especially for those who have been under-resourced, disadvantaged, discriminated against. But at 100, I'm not through. I still have some things I want to do. I've just put them in still different suits. By the time we come together, I hope to celebrate my 105th. I want to have finished some things I've started and some things I'm starting. Top of the list is to repurpose educational assessment to better serve learning. A couple of people have talked about a seminar that some of us are engaged in on educational assessment in the service of learning. We just, I think, about agreed that the project for that group will be a handbook on research and practice of assessment in the service of learning. If you've looked at the year-long plans for the commemoration of my century, down at NYU, we've got a year-long seminar planned for next year. And through it, we are trying to reconceptualize popular notions and practices of equal educational opportunity. Equal educational opportunity. We want to change the popular notion to substitute equity for equal. Equal seems to suggest sameness, trying to provide for poor kids, Black kids, Latino kids, or Native American kids, experiences that are like the best that are provided in this country. I think it was maybe 50 years ago, I suggested that for educational opportunities to be equal, they shouldn't be the same, but they should be customized. They should be appropriate and sufficient to the needs of the persons we are trying to educate. Given the fact that the model that we want to make available to everybody isn't working for everybody, if we switch that notion to equal, we've got to figure out what it is that each learner needs and try to adapt education, customize education. I used to talk about individualizing, but I think maybe customizing is more appropriate. I've got a third concern. This one was influenced by my friend and colleague, Kenji. In thinking about my almost lifelong interests in human diversity and pedagogy, we recognized that the field has not fully embraced the need to mine, that is M-I-N-E, the conceptual store of knowledge we have on how people learn. We've got 2 volumes on it, but they speak to learning in people, in humans. Given the attention I've given to human variance, I'd love in the next 5 years to convince, say, the Congress to commission one of the academies to do a 3rd volume of how people learn. This one differentiated to reflect the vast amount of human variance that is true of the populations pool of learners that we must serve. I'm moving to another of my wishes. I've had a rich experience with people in the course of my life in trying to think about what I would talk about. I was almost going to devote all of my talk to how much I have benefited from a remarkably rich and diverse group of people, beginning, of course, with family. And then I went down to Howard University in Washington, historically, I guess it thinks of itself as the premier historically Black university in the country. But I was there in the late 30s and early 40s when Mordecai Johnson took advantage of discrimination. We Black people couldn't be hired by Columbia and Harvard and Yale and Princeton and even UCLA and the California system. So Mordecai collected there on the campus of Howard just about every Black person in the country who had earned a doctoral degree. So I got to study with Alain Locke, Franklin Frazier, Ernest Just. The list is endless. Anyway, that unique experience at Howard extended into my later life to give me encounters with Dubois, Alain Locke, the theologian Howard Thurman, and a not so widely known educator by the name of Doxy Wilkerson. I hope in the next 5 years, the young people, and some of them are not so young anymore, the folk who have hung out with me, who have been the beneficiaries of the values that I learned from these giants. I'm trying to get them to join with me to publish deontic pursuits, moral pursuits, because these Black scholars who helped to shape me were not just about learning, producing knowledge, mastering knowledge. They seem to have been influenced by Du Bois' commitment. Du Bois thought if you know something, if you're educated, if you're better prepared than other people, then you got a responsibility. You got a responsibility to act on it. So deontic pursuits, I hope, will be my protege's take on the values that influence the people who helped to shape me. I've got 2 more aspirations, and I'm even working on one of them. You know, if you've looked at my bibliography, my books, I've got a book on supplementary education and another on affirmative development of academic ability. And in both of these books, we talk about the kinds of activities, the kinds of experiences, the kinds of supported opportunities that seem to be associated with high levels of academic achievement. They also seem to be associated with families of affluence and sophistication. Interestingly enough, in this country and across the world, people who don't have access to political power and economic resources don't seem to provide for their kids much in the form of the supplements to schooling that I claim in supplementary education enable schools to work. I want to make that available to a broader range of people. And what do you do if you want to reach a large number of people in modern times? You go into the internet. I want to, and some of my friends, my son and I think one of my former students who speak later on, we are trying to develop a virtual student development, a virtual supplementary education source that is accessible via cyberspace. So if our new president succeeds in making high-speed internet capacity available wherever you are in this country, kids and their parents anywhere in this country will be able to tap in to the resources they need to provide to inform the supplements that we claim are part of supplementary education. And the last is an idea that I stole from my friend Kenji. I introduced him to Dubois' work, and he came back one day to talk to me about something he was reading in Dubois' autobiography in 1943, I think it was. Dubois convened a group at Morehouse College. That's one of the premier historically Black institutions. He convened this group trying to help the historically Black colleges, admonishing them to pool their resources to increase their capacity to do basic research. And he thought that they might begin collaborating on research on Black folk. But he aspired to have them become more competitive in their exploitation of the government's heavy investment in research, which at that time about 2 to 3% of the money was going to historically Black institutions, because historically white institutions were better staffed, better equipped, better prepared, and better favored to do such work. So that last hope of mine is to pick up my friend Dubois's notion and see if, together with some of my proteges at historically Black institutions, to recreate his notion of a collaboration between those institutions to strengthen the research capacity of those institutions. Now, this is a little removed slightly from some of the other things that have occupied my attention. But if you think about them, they are not really different. A substantial portion of Black students in college these days are educated in historically Black institutions. Some people even claim that these institutions do a better job of graduating these kids and preparing them for their leadership positions. Or if you want another kind of statistic, you can look at the fact that among the leadership folk from the Black community, certainly in my generation and the one that followed, more than half of us got our starts in these institutions. Fortunately, the current administration is again trying to strengthen them. I want to do a little bit to help them. Now, that's a big agenda, but I've always had a big agenda. And I've got some former students out there who I hope will help me. They are a talented crew. So, Erica, thank you for a great conference. And thank you all for remembering me. And I must talk about all of you who are not necessarily in this place or even tuned into this connection. I've had a very blessed life. And a lot of it is because of you, the people who've helped me do whatever it is I've done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We love you, Dr. Gordon. Thank you so much for continuing to share your wisdom and love with us. I can't express how happy we are all to be here and listening to you and learning from you this evening. I'm going to turn it over now for remarks from some folks who have funded your work and supported your work and sponsored your work over the years. So there are going to be 4 speakers, and in order, we will hear from Dr. Naila Nasir, who is president of the Spencer Foundation and also president of the American Educational Research Association. We'll also hear from Dr. Adam Gamarin, who is president of the William T. Grant Foundation. We'll hear from Dr. Kent McGuire, who's program director of education for the Hewlett Foundation and a TC alum, I have to say that. Dr. Walt McDonald, who's president of the Educational Testing Service. All of these wonderful folks are renowned scholars and researchers and leaders in their fields, award-winning, highly published, and we thank them so much for taking time to be here this evening. We'll start with Dr. Nasir.
Wonderful. I'm honored to be here. I'm inspired by your comments, Dr. Gordon. And I just want to say a couple of things. One, I want to say that you have left us touched by your work, changed by your scholarship, and inspired to carry that work on. This meeting has been really tremendous in elaborating the roadmap that Dr. Gordon has laid out for us. And I think that it's in this kind of historic national moment where we are at a time when education is considering what it can be, that we're on the heels of realizing the incredibly dire consequences of the levels of inequity in our education system. And we are on the heels of realizing that change might be possible. In this moment, what you've laid out for us, I think is particularly salient. And I think it's no accident that that happens on the 100th year of your birth. The program you've laid out around focusing on equitable education structures, how to create more equity in educational opportunity, thinking about assessments that focus on learning rather than accountability, supporting the role of historically Black colleges and universities in building research infrastructure, and then thinking about how we leverage and grow learning both in school, but also in these out of school, more supplementary spaces. It constitutes a program that we can continue to move forward. And I have to say, like, as a person who studied informal learning, I have long been inspired by Professor Gordon's work and by him. And I'll say there's something else about his legacy that's about as much who he is as it is about the scholarship itself. And so I'll tell a bit of a story. When I was a junior professor, I knew Dr. Gordon, but he did not know me. And I'll say by way of context that I come from a family without many elders, no grandfathers, no grandfather figures. And I watched Professor Gordon and I read his work and I paid attention to how he moved in the academy and in the world. And as a young scholar, what struck me, in addition to the legacy of the ideas, was what I observed about his marriage. He and his wife were always together. If you saw one at a meeting, you saw the other, and the interactions were clearly loving and intimate and present in this scholarly space. And so for me, in addition to being a model of what a scholar could be, Professor Gordon was a model for what marriage and family could look like in the academy. And so I wanted to make that point because I think that who we are, in addition to what ideas we lend, all of that imprints upon the field. And I'm just so grateful and honored at the imprints you have left for us, Dr. Gordon. Honored that the Spencer Foundation could support this amazing celebration. Kudos to all who brought it into fruition, and happy, happy, happy birthday, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you very much, Naila. Thank you.
Well, I'd also like to add my thanks, first of all, for inviting me to share some remarks. Second, for the opportunity to honor Ed Gordon. And third, for celebrating progress in education research. As was mentioned at yesterday's welcome, and Ed, you commented in your remarks, this conference is the first of a year-long series of commemoration activities, and I have the honor of being part of 3 of them as a supporter of activities at Teachers College and NYU, and as the chair of an upcoming session at the annual meeting next fall of the National Academy of Education.
Here.
So why is this important? Well, a 100th birthday is a rare event and reason enough for such a celebratory season. But the occasion of the centenary also offers opportunities for reflection, reflections on where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. It is all too easy to lament. The problems we face today are the same as the problems we faced 100 years ago. Too much has not changed, or too little has changed for the better. We face some of the same challenges that we have faced in the past. But in fact, as we could see from the past 2 days and from Ed's remarks this evening, there has been progress. And much of that has been contributed by Ed Gordon and his students in fields such as assessment to support rather than undermine learning, on pedagogy that is culturally responsive and builds social identity, on dismantling the old narrative that money doesn't matter, and once again, advocating for fair funding, for equitable, not equal, but equitable funding, and to focus on Ed's latest agenda on restoring equal opportunity, on building equal opportunity for all students. I think I could speak for all of the funders involved tonight that we want to be part of this progress. We share the commitment that you described to social justice. At the William T. Grant Foundation, this means moving the field of researchers from understanding inequality, how much there is, what its sources are, to reducing inequality and to dismantling systemic racism and the structural foundations of inequality. Research has a role to play in that social justice agenda. I think that is the key insight, and we're all in this together. We also want to improve the way evidence is used. Evidence from research is used in policy and practice, recognizing this is not just a matter of communicating research findings in a timely, relevant, and accessible manner. It's not even just a matter of improving the quality of research. It's a matter of building relationships between producers and consumers of research who are intertwined. I'll jump back to the Dubois Agenda, which I too have become more familiar with in the last couple of years as it was shamefully neglected from my education in sociology several decades ago. But I've become more familiar with it now, and I know that social justice was Dubois's agenda, and what I particularly value is his view that research could serve the ends of social justice. And I think that's an agenda we're trying to revive today. So this has been an inspiring day, and it will be an inspiring series over the course of the year. And I would like to close on a personal note. In the same year that Ed Gordon is turning 100, I am turning 65. Now, some think of 65 as an age for retirement. But if I take Ed Gordon as my example, I have 35 years, a whole career ahead of me. Think about that. That is quite remarkable. Thank you for the example that you set, for the work you have accomplished, and for this year-long celebration.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. And make good use of that 35 years. Thank you.
Dr. Gordon, I wonder if you've been talking to my wife, who has clearly indicated that I should work for at least the next 35 years. Ed, Peter Rivera, and I, as alums of Teachers College, really appreciate the opportunity to support this celebration of your, what we would call prodigious and incomparable career, both as a scholar and an activist. I'm full of praise for the folks who came together to put it together. It's just a real honor to have a few minutes to offer a comment and to wish you happy birthday. I couldn't agree more with the agenda that you just advanced a few minutes ago. And I can't think of a person who's been more interested in a range of issues having to do over time with learning, equity, and justice. You talk about your ability to remember things or not remember things. I can't think of anybody with a better memory about some of the things that you actually want to see happen, and the expectations you hold, not just for yourself, but for others. I mean, you talked just a few minutes ago about a pretty ambitious body of work that you hope and expect so many of the people that you've worked with and helped to develop will take up. I just want to expand upon this last point with my own story. Years ago, I remember being a discussant at a presidential session at AERA. The topic of that session was the Gordon Commission report. And I don't remember all that much of what I said toward the end of that session, but I remember suggesting that the report advances a narrative, particularly the sections focused on duties, rights, and privileges, the paper on democracy and the uses of education, and the paper on assessment in the service of teaching and learning. Certainly the United States part of that story. And I argued that that ought to be understood in civil rights terms. That in fact, there's a narrative there that should be taken up by the civil rights community and other advocates for educational equity. I thought I was done. The session was over. I didn't take more time than was allotted to me. You came up to me afterwards, you might not remember this, and you said something to the effect, you know, Kent, you're right about that. And then in the next sentence you said, and Kent, you should do something about that, is what you said to me. And of course, time passed. And I don't really think I did very much of anything with it right away. Oh, I do remember distinctly having conversations with Michael Nettles and a few others about what should happen to follow up on this important body of work, given that ETS had been the institutional sponsor for it. And we came up with a few things. I moved on from Temple to the Southern Education Foundation, in fact, a civil rights organization, really. And I did take up some of what we talked about, especially in the context of policy conversations in the South, where standardized tests were then and are today a significant barrier to upward mobility. But I hadn't actually re-engaged you on that. And then we got to do some thinking about it. And I was come to see you again while attending a TC board meeting, where on the agenda was your career and the Institute, which of course, Tom announced yesterday would now bear your name. And while there, you reminded me in your gracious and gentle way that I was capable of doing much more than I had demonstrated to date, you know, and you encouraging me to stay focused, you know, on this. So fast forward, now I'm at Hewlett, and as recently as a year ago, you reached out to me to bring my attention to a number of things that you were working on. I ended up calling you on your cell phone. You were in a car with your grandkids somewhere in Southern California. No, not where you were headed. And And I think I asked you first, as I should have, how are you doing? And you said, Ken, I'm doing quite well, but I don't plan to be around forever. And so it would be good if you could attend to some of these issues that we have discussed. The point I'm trying to make actually is that I don't think you lose sight of the things that you want and expect us to take up, and that the activist in you is every bit as vibrant as is your intellectual energy and curiosity. So I simply want to be on record to say that I do plan to take these issues up. You know, I will work on, given my current charter, on thinking through how to measure that which is actually worthy of a student's time, how to advance approaches in assessment that actually inform teaching and learning. I will attend to my early claim to work to build the capacity of the civil rights community to take up and consider a broader range of ideas and outcomes that I know we all value, and that should therefore be the subject of assessment. And I'll look forward to your counsel and advice as I do so. Again, it's a real blessing to have had the opportunity to wish you a happy birthday. My wife, Yvonne, also a pediatrician, celebrates her birthday on the same day that you do. So I have very powerful incentives not to forget yours. And we'll remember to send our regards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. You'll have a chance to do something even more about that mutual civil rights interest. I didn't have time to talk about a conference down at Morehouse we are planning for the spring of 22, where we want to bring the civil rights community together to look at the new research we have in education that ought to influence the agenda of that community.
That's right.
I need both your counsel and
of course, your
thank you, Ken.
Good evening, Dr. Gordon. I want to start by thanking Mojave, Erica, Amy, and Kenji for organizing the celebration of our friend, colleague, and inspiration. And I want to thank them for inviting me. This has been an absolutely terrific conference. All of us attend a lot of events in the course of the year, and it does no harm to any of them to say that this conference honoring the intellectual legacy of Ed Gordon stands above and apart. That's because Ed Gordon's contributions stand above and apart to psychology, to teaching, to learning, to child development, to equity, to assessment, and to countless other areas related to our understanding of human potential and how to unlock and nurture it, particularly among underserved students. Let me put it this way. Lawyers know Blackstone, physicians know Gray, politicians know Machiavelli, and we know Gordon. It's just the way it is. And it's been that way for a really long time. I am very grateful for the opportunity to offer a few words in tribute. Plus, after the 15 months we've all just had, it's about time we had something great to celebrate. At ETS, our mission is to advance quality and equity in education for all learners, regardless of their race, income, background, or circumstances. Ed Gordon's work embodies quality and equity in education. No other scholar has examined and directed society's attention to educational quality and equity as tirelessly and as productively. As one writer put it, before most of us knew what an achievement gap, an opportunity gap was, Dr. Gordon was working to eliminate it. Ed Gordon has always been ahead of the curve. He was ahead of the curve in identifying non-school factors such as family and community dynamics to promote sustained academic achievement. Today's education policy is incomplete unless it addresses a student's holistic experience. He was ahead of his time on the importance of early learning and what an effective program should include, Today's push for universal pre-K echoes Ed Gordon's original concept for Head Start. An architect of the program, he designed it to include family and community development, as well as child learning and support. As my ETS colleague and Ed Gordon mentee, Michael Mills, has said, more than half a century after the launch of Head Start, preschool is now at the foundation of efforts to ensure and sustain educational achievement for all learners. Hopefully by this time around, it will include holistic elements that were stripped out 60 years ago by policymakers. Ed Gordon was ahead of his time too in examining the importance of affective and situative domains in cognitive learning and development. Today's social and emotional skills are widely viewed as essential components of students' learning and personal development. Throughout his career, Ed Gordon has pointed out the future with a remarkable foresight. A decade ago, ETS asked him to glimpse at the future of assessment. The report of the Gordon Commission on the Future of Assessment held that assessments would need to go beyond accountability. They would need to guide and inform teachers to equip students with the full range of skills they will need to make their way in a complex, interconnected, often ambiguous world shaped by digital technology. The best assessments, he said, would be worth the attention and energy of teachers and students. We listened. ETS Research and Development has been moving precisely in that direction. Our term for it is assessments of, for, and as learning. I could go on. He's written 18 books and more than 200 scholarly articles. He's been elected a fellow of numerous prestigious organizations and has been named one of America's most prolific and thoughtful scholars. Pardon the assessment pun, but his influence is literally beyond measure. As you've heard again and again today and yesterday, in his long, extremely productive career, Ed Gordon has also been a mentor, a model colleague, an untiring advocate for the underserved, and a treasured friend to so many. It has been an honor to have worked with and learned from him. For me, and also from my predecessor at ETS, Kurt Landgraf, and from all of us at ETS, congratulations, happy birthday, Professor Gordon. Thank you very, very much for all you've done and all you're going to do in the years ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Walt. Thank you very much. It's like, well, I think one of my kids is going to be around, but it's like home folk. ETS has kind of been a second home for me over these years. Thank you very much.
And it always will be.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you to all of those wonderful speakers. We so appreciate your being here and appreciate your support of Dr. Gordon's work and all of his initiatives. Our next speaker will be one of Dr. Gordon's children, Dr. Edmund T. Gordon, or Dr. Ted Gordon as we know, who's a professor of African and African Diaspora Studies and Anthropology and the Vice Provost for Diversity at the University of Texas in Austin. Welcome, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you. Hopefully you can all hear me. Hello, Dad. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. Thank you, son.
All right. Well, hang in there just a little while longer.
All right.
Hear a few more accolades. So as a family, we thank the organizers of this Centennial convening here at the TC in Columbia, and particularly Drs. Walker, Wells, and Chatterjee for their work in organizing and hosting this event. Many thanks also to Dr. Kenji Hakuda and all the others who are working to organize similar convenings around the nation in this, our father's centennial year. My sisters and brother have asked me to represent them in contributing our reflections to this gathering. In doing so, I'll read you part of a collective effort of family remembrance to try to put our father into his historical, social, and family perspective. Our father's grandfather was a minister in the Anglican Church in Montego Bay, Jamaica. A highly educated Black man, probably a generation out of slavery. He sent his two sons, Edmund and Robert, to the United States, to Leonard Medical School in North Carolina. One became a doctor and the other a dentist. Dr. Edmund Taylor Gordon, our grandfather, moved to Goldsboro, North Carolina, where he married Mabel Ellison a school teacher, and a daughter of a free Black woman whose last name he took, and the son of an enslaved father who was an enlistee in the Union Navy at 15 and one of the only Black boat captains on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Our dad left home at the age of 15 to go to college at Howard University, the premier institution of higher education available to Blacks in his day. His father passed away when he was 20, so he became an adult early. Dad's intellect and wisdom showed at a very young age, and his parents recognized and valued this. They learned to take his advice and to expect a lot from him. He was a leader at his school. He led a band at a local hotel as a teen. He was also said that his father, the town doctor of Black folks in Goldsboro, North Carolina, the place of his birth, instilled in him a need to help those less fortunate. His immediate family, his parents and his sister and brother, and these early leadership roles had a strong impact on him. His brother was mentally impaired due to birth injuries. We believe that his brother's disability, his mother's struggles to care for him, and the woeful absence of mental health care available for Blacks in the South during his youth propelled our father into his professional interests and career. He and all of us can rattle off the names of many of those who influenced him throughout his life, and we've heard about many of them already. W.B. Du Bois, Alain Locke, Howard Thurman, E. Franklin Frazier. Didn't mention Ralph Bunche, but Bunche was around at that time. And then later Doxy Wilkinson, Charles White, and others. Many of these personal and intellectual relationships he developed at Howard in its heyday, when so many of the top Black intellectuals taught there, and then in Harlem in the late 1940s and 50s. Accordingly, one of the most important sources of his development is his insatiable thirst for knowledge and his embrace of different ways of knowing, as represented by the varied perspectives, skills, and knowledges represented by these persons. This has encouraged him to seek out individuals, experiences, and phenomena on a vast array of subjects, as he himself admits, and to analyze all of them from a multitude of perspectives and contexts. His intellectual curiosity is a direct result of his desire to know and his association with others who contributed to his store of knowledge. Our mother, Dr. Susan Elizabeth Gitt Gordon, was a huge influence on him. She was extremely intelligent and knowledgeable, politically radical and active, wise, vibrant, committed, loving. In our mother, he found unconditional love. She encouraged him when he felt discouraged. Her intelligence, education, work ethic, and generous, compassionate nature and activism deeply influenced him. Our mother grew up with as much privilege as a woman in our society can have, so she always felt that anything was possible. She was a radical thinker and activist, a women's rights, social, racial, and economic justice advocate, and an environmentalist who believed that societal change was both necessary and achievable. She was also stubborn, curious, and had a lot of stamina, which she needed to keep this man in line. We remember the two of them having long discussions about every aspect of their and our lives. Our mother was our father's sounding board. She was the one who listened to his ideas, helped him flesh them out, and challenged him to go further. Our mom was the firebrand, and our dad would say, okay, I agree, but how can we frame it in a more consumable way? Commitment to each other, willingness to work out problems, dedication to common goals, open communication, passion for the work at hand were all qualities and behaviors that they modeled for us. Edmund W. Gordon is a person of great depth and accomplishment. We, his family, think of him as a great man. But as he will tell you himself, he's a product of a remarkable historical web of family and associates. As he tells us, with that pedigree, how could he not have turned out to be great? Thanks, Dad, and thanks to you all.
Thank you, Todd and Rick, and Jess and Joe. I love you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gordon. It's my pleasure to announce a part of the program where we can hear from a panel of Dr. Gordon's students and mentees about his influence and inspiration. Beginning with my friend, Dr. David Wall-Rice, who is going to facilitate this discussion. Dr. Wall-Rice is professor of psychology at Morehouse College and principal investigator of the Identity, Art, and Democracy Lab. Thank you so much, Dr. Rice, for leading this panel.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here this evening and to be in concert with the esteemed colleagues that I find before me. And again, I echo Ted in thanking Dr. Walker, Dr. Wells, and Dr. Chatterjee for assembling this and having me as a part. One of the things that we note this and good evening, Professor. Love you. I hope you. Hello.
I assumed that there was a hello in there.
One of the things that we see in paying tribute to Professor is that it's not only him and his genius, but tribute to him is very much steeped in the people with whom he surrounds himself, and certainly in the individuals that he chooses to be a part of the Gordon School. And to that end, we're joined today by a tremendous set of thinkers. Jonathan Colson, Veronica Hawley, Brenda Mejia, Philip Smith, and Beatrice Bridgegall. And one of the things that we wanted to do in kind of explaining our relationship to Professor Gordon was to meditate a bit and think on a dynamic social justice that he puts in front of us, but also the fundamental of who he is as bound in his innate humanness, his goodness, his love, of course, and also the accountability and responsibility that he charges those that he is in concert with to take on. So toward that end, what I'm asking for each of the folks who are impaneled here with us in this part of the mentors, or excuse me, the mentees in celebrating Professor, is to talk a little bit about who you are. I'd like for you all to introduce yourselves and talk about how you came to know Professor, but also how these attributes have informed you and the work that you've done in relationship to him. And I guess I'll ask Veronica first. So it's unfair because I know Veronica and Brenda well in having studied at UME. So Veronica, if you'll start and just tell us who you are and what you do, and most of us know this already, but how it is you came to know Professor and kind of the responsibilities that you have as attached to the Gordon School and being a mentee of his.
Thank you, David. Thank you. First of all, happy birthday, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you very much, Veronica.
Thank you. I want to thank Erica and Amy and Dr. Chatterjee. This has been an outstanding conference, more than we can ever imagine. So thank you for the hard work that we all put into it, but you guys have done an outstanding job. I am, most folks know me, I think, the Assistant Director of the Institute for Urban and Minority Education. I first met Dr. Gordon, I believe. Now, Dr. Gordon, you may not recall this, but I do. I first met you on the first floor of Main Hall. We were both on our way to the cafeteria, I believe. And I struck up a conversation with you about what UME was doing. And we started to talk about the Supplementary Education Initiative. And you had asked me whether I ran an after school program before. And I said, yeah, I've done that before. And next thing you know, you had hired me to run your supplemental education program in Central Harlem. So that was a great honor. David, Dr. Gordon has, influenced me in so many ways. I did prepare a couple of remarks to actually get at exactly how. So I'd like to read that if I will.
Please.
Okay, so I think Dr. Gordon has impacted the way in which I engage in university and community partnerships. That has been the most impactful piece. Specifically, it's easy for us to identify the talents and scholarship of students and faculty at the university who want to engage in low-income schools and communities. But it's equally important, but not as easy, to recognize and engage the expertise and understanding and creativity of families and schools and community members. It is these ideas of respect and the building of trust and reciprocity that is something that I've tried to carry on, and it's something that I've learned so deeply from Dr. Gordon over the years. Dr. Gordon's impact on the way I support students and faculty has its roots in village building, and it's very, very familiar. You know, David, you had asked us to kind of focus on the family aspect, of Dr. Gordon's work, but so much of his work mirrors what I knew to be true in my own family, specifically the Supplementary Education Initiative. And one of the things that's least talked about in the Supplementary Education Initiative is the importance of family. I recall how Dr. Gordon would often say it is important for after-school programs and schools to take children to the museum and libraries and cultural experiences and to provide tutoring. But the magic truly happens when parents and families take their children by the hand and engage in these experiences alongside them. That's where the true magic happens. This I knew to be true. This I knew to be so familiar to my upbringing, my own personal family experiences. But I never really heard it articulated in the way that Dr. Gordon had done it. So as I think about the program development and the policy and the practices and all the stuff that we've done over the years at UME, I never leave families out of the equation. And I owe this focus of my work to you, Dr. Gordon. It has been an honor and a high privilege to work with you, Dr. Gordon, over the years. My only regret, and I've said this to you often, was not coming to work with you sooner, because I was working downstairs of Jean Brooks Gunn and Shannon Kagan for a couple of years, but my only regret was not coming to work with you sooner. Thank you for the incredible opportunity to share and to shape the lives of so many children, families, and scholars, and educators and policymakers. Supporting your work and vision for our community has been a great highlight of my life. It truly has, of which I am extremely proud. The love and encouragement that you and Dr. Susan have given me over the years is only matched by what my own parents have given me. And I thank you for that. Now more than ever, I remain tirelessly dedicated to ensuring that the world knows of your work, your heart, and your vision. May you enjoy the year-long Centennial celebration scheduled around the country for you, of which is only fitting for the king that you are. Happy birthday, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, wow, Veronica, thank you for dropping the mic in the very beginning in terms of providing impact. Those were beautiful words, and thank you so much. And one of the things that we had said, at least via email communication, was, again, to carry on Veronica's point, is this idea of family and this interconnectedness, this idea of having fictive sons and grands and daughters and the like. And I'm interested in how it is that has informed others' work, in terms of responsibility and accountability. And I hate to do this. I'm given a time check, right? So I'm given that we have to be done in about 7 minutes. So this is a huge ask on behalf of the folks who are remaining. But I'll ask Jonathan Colson if you can talk to us a little bit about how it is that Professor's impact has influenced you in your work.
Sure. And I'm happy to pick up after Veronica, who has been so much an influence and inspiration to me. She's who introduced me to Dr. Gordon. The professor's name precedes him. even precedes the name of our institute. The Institute for Urban and Minority Education has been kind of my gravitational hub, and it was there that I met Dr. Gordon, ostensibly for a conference to just
Oh, no, come on back, Jonathan. All right, so what I'm going to do there is I'm going to pivot to Beatrice. So Dr. Bridgegall, can you talk to us a little bit about how it is that Professor has influenced you in your work? Oh, Jonathan's come back. But Beatrice, I'm going to ask you to go, and Jonathan,
I got you.
Okay, absolutely. So a warm thank you to our hosts for inviting me to talk about really a national treasure, Dr. Edmund W. Gordon, on the eve of his 100th birthday. The biggest impact of Professor Gordon's mentorship and friendship really for over 2 decades now is access to his unique perspective, many of which inform a critical problem in education upended by this pandemic. And that is, how do we reorient the nature and scope of teacher preparation programs, particularly in the face of declining interest in the profession and declining enrollment nationwide. So as the Dean of the School of Education and Social Sciences at SUNY Rockland, I am actually working with Dr. Gordon and others, including our SUNY Chancellor, Dr. Malatras, and the chair of the SUNY Board of Trustees, our own TC alumni, Dr. Merrill Tisch, to reverse these trends by really looking closely at how other countries such as Finland and Singapore are addressing this issue, and by investigating how the use of technology such as virtual reality, for example, can help teacher candidates become better prepared to handle the myriad social, emotional, and cultural issues that students may present in the classroom. So this work includes collaborating with faculty to reorient curriculum, teaching, and learning to not only address the demographic and economic shifts that have occurred across the US in the last 5 decades, but also to increase the number of candidates of color, given projections that the K through 12 population in the US, it will be less than 50% white by 2025. So the imperative of better preparing teacher candidates has taken on a new urgency. And I would say that Professor Gordon's life, his work, his mentorship has really prepared me to work with others to meet this urgency with integrity, intelligence, and intentionality. And so on the eve of your birthday, Dr. Gordon, I thank you for your guidance, your light and grace, and for the privilege of calling you friend and mentor. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice.
wonderful, Dr. Bridgegall. Thank you so much. Jonathan, can you continue with your impact and connect, please? You're on mute.
Thanks.
There we go.
Thanks for dealing with all my technical difficulties so smoothly, Dr. Lawrence. I was saying that I'd met Dr. Gordon for the first time at UME. We were going to talk about a conference, but he ended up talking to each one of us as people. Just wanted to know his UME fan. He wanted to know how and what he could learn from us and how he could help us. Just that humility says a lot about his values and his aim. Incidentally, that first meeting was with Dr. Ezekiel Dixon-Roman about the Gordon paradigm for inquiry and practice. And I feel like we're all a part of that school. And I think there are plans coming for that to become something bigger. Just because we're time crunched, I just want to close by expressing that I really respect and admire Dr. Gordon for his self-awareness and his selflessness. He's ever mindful of his thoughts. He's ever attending to his friendships. And as a result, everything he does is with and for community, even perhaps especially when he offers loving critique in that way that comes so naturally from him. So I sense that in so many of you that are here in this call, and it's just an honor to be a part of this community and family.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Philip Smith, can you help us next and tell us a little bit about how it is you've been influenced and informed by the great professor?
Yeah, I will do. Thank you. Firstly, good evening, Professor Gordon, and join others in saying happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of how I came to know Professor Gordon, so I was formerly a student at Teachers College and currently a postdoc fellow at TC and also a research fellow with UMI. I came to TC maybe 7, 8 years ago from the UK and was invited to be part of a project with Professor Gordon. And that was actually, that I did not get off to a good start. It was very overwhelming. I struggled as a new doctoral student, international student, in the company of a giant. And to all intents and purposes, that relationship, I would say, was less than successful. Fast forward a few years, maybe just over 2 years ago, had the opportunity to reconnect with Professor Gordon. And now I'm working with him on a number of projects. And I share that to say, for me, one of the most precious things about Professor Gordon is his spirit of generosity and care. So even though at first you may falter, he's there to support you and guide you. And for that, I'm extremely grateful and appreciative. And so again, happy birthday, Professor Gordon. And thank you to everyone who's organized a wonderful celebration in his behalf. Okay, and thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Philip.
And Dr. Mejia Smith, you are a finalist here. Can you talk to us a little bit about your relationship with Professor and how it is that you have progressed through the academy and how it's been of consequence, please?
Thank you, David. First, I just want to say I'm honored to celebrate you, Professor, today on your birthday and just be part of your this panel of mentees. I first met Professor in 2001 when I took his class on cultural psychology. I was a master's student at TC at the time. I think that was about when he stopped teaching. So I was very fortunate to benefit from his wisdom and intellect and had the opportunity to spend many exchanges just picking his brain about how was it that he was so calm and poised when talking about racism and oppression. And I just felt I had so much growing to do to get there. I was fortunate after graduating from my master's to then apply to a job at UMI, where I spent many years as a research associate and continued to develop my relationship with Professor, who then became my mentor and also a family member. And it was also through my work at UMI that obviously Professor did, foster my intellectual competence, and it encouraged me to apply for a PhD. So today I'm a psychologist. I'm at Princeton University, where I counsel undergraduate and graduate students, and I would not be here today as a psychologist if it not were for Professor, who is influential in developing my competence as a person, professionally, who introduced me to multiculturalism, perspectivism, relativism, I mean, so many different constructs. And it's because of him today that I'd like to think that I'm making a difference in the lives of young students at Princeton, particularly underrepresented students, many of whom struggle with, trauma, having to negotiate double consciousness, cultural code switching, right? And that I like to think that I'm part of cultivating their inner strengths in the same way that Professor helped me to realize, my career goals. So I am forever grateful to Professor for helping me to achieve my dream of becoming a psychologist. And I just want to wish you a very happy birthday. And I just hope that you will be around for many more years and continue to make the world a better place for our children.
Thank you, Brenda.
So I want to take the opportunity to thank all of you all, the panelists and the mentees of Professor who have come through the Institute for Urban and Minority Education. I actually was a postdoc at UMI for 1 year. And I met Professor Gordon through Wade Boykin, who's at Howard University. And even though I went to Morehouse College as an undergraduate, Professor, I guess, took my call because of Wade. He blocked and tackled for me. And Wade Boykin said that, I really needed to study at the feet of this great elder. And, I just remember the first time meeting him, the thing that impacted me so much and was persistent was his posture, not just his intellectual posture, which of course is profound. But his physical posture, I remember him walking in his Birkenstocks worn to the sides, with his hands behind his back, chest out, and being totally vulnerable and available. And for me, that said so much about the person that he was and the space that he was making for the people who were connected to him. And he has been consistent with that. I don't want to repeat all of the great things that you all have said in terms of relationship with Professor, but he certainly is family. And that is profound, that he can call so many hundreds of people family because of how he intentionally invests in them. And I was at UMI for 1 year. I was slated, and that means I'm going to get off in about 30 seconds. I promise, Dr. Walker. I was there for 1 year, thinking of extending my time there when I got a job offer from Morehouse College, which again is where I went. And Professor was the single person who said to me, he said, David, because of your interest, because of your work, you need to go to Morehouse College. He said, if I had it over, and I hope I'm not betraying any confidences here, but one of the things he said is that if I had it to do over again, one of the things that I would do is I would go to Howard University. You have the opportunity to go back to your alma mater and do applied work. You know, he had me reading Pastor's Quadrant. You have applied work to do, not basic work. And I went as an assistant professor. I'm full professor now. And it's not just the status, right? But what it is that I'm to do with that. Professor blessed me out in a beautiful way earlier this week. We were in conversation with one another. He holds you accountable because he knows what your potential is, but more importantly, he knows what the stakes are. As De La Soul has said, the stakes are high, and what he's going to demand of the people that he's connected with is that they are going to be in service to community. So Professor, I echo all of the love that people have shared for you tonight. I thank my UMI family for coming together and being here in panel. And Professor, we certainly will carry on the good work that you have charged us to carry on with you and beyond. Thank you so much. Happy birthday and love to all.
Thank you so much to that wonderful panel. I think they are a testament to Dr. Gordon's generosity, as one of the panelists said, his reach, and the broad network that Dr. Gordon has cultivated for us. And as one final example of that amazing network, after 2 days of wonderful conversations and speeches and panels, we're going to ask Dr. Bob Fullylove, who's a longtime colleague and friend of Dr. Gordon, to share some remarks. And then Amy Madabi and I will come back and give a special blessing to Dr. Gordon. Thank you so much, Dr. Fullylove, for being here.
Oh, believe me, the pleasure is mine. So first and foremost, Ed, Dr. Gordon, happy birthday. I had a conversation with Mindy Thompson Fullylove this morning, and we both had an opportunity to reflect on the fact that with her graduation from the College of Physicians and Surgeons at Columbia in 1978, and with me starting at Teachers College in 1972, we're two folk who have benefited not just from you, but from the dynamic that was so much a part of your family that your son spoke of so eloquently. We cannot begin to say how blessed we have been to just know that as folk who have devoted time and energy to a wide variety of projects, from civil rights to education, that you have always been something of a beacon, something of an existence proof, a proof of concept. You can certainly do it. I came to Teachers College in '72 to study higher and adult education. It was at that moment in American history when suddenly historically white colleges were opening their doors and everybody was wondering, what are we going to do to make sure that the new students to higher education, women, older folk, folk of color, what are we going to do to make sure that they survive, that they do well? You were the first one who pointed out that so much of what we were doing was beginning from a deficit model. We were assuming that what had to happen was we had to take folk who were inherently weak and somehow make them not necessarily strong. Our job was to make them survive. And you were so clear, it's not deficits that drive education, it's resources. Spend the money, give folk the tools, they will survive. How else do we explain our rise from slavery? I never forgot that, because it is true that having done a lot in higher education, working on programs that tried to promote excellence, not simply survival, and knowing that that was one of your key projects as well. Where are we going to get our scholars? Where are we going to get the folk who will excel, not simply survive? You were early on one of the first folk to say that much of our conversation in education was limited because our vision was so limited. And it was limited by a set of circumstances that you have spent a lifetime trying to help us understand. And you've done your best to help us illuminate the nature of the challenges that are still ever present as we try in this nation to overcome our history as a slave-holding nation that is still unable to fully accept all of the lessons that we should have learned from our rather drastic and frequently traumatic past. I want to thank everybody because this is the first time in almost a year I have been around a group of scholars and have not talked endlessly of COVID-19. Some of you know that I'm speaking to you from 169th Street at the Columbia University Irving Medical Center, a place where Susan Gordon taught. And I've been surrounded, as are people in public health, with counting the bodies that have been so much a function of living through this pandemic. Dr. Gordon, what I loved about what you had to say about your plans was the degree to which you didn't simply focus on the past. At age 100, you're talking about the future. I think that's where our conversations need to be. I know I'm not the only one in the room who's aware of the fact that this pandemic has completely upset the apple cart. It's almost as if Mother Nature has pressed the reset button. And everything that we're about to do in the coming months and years is going to have to build upon everything that has changed and everything that has been damaged as a result of this pandemic. Where the damage is probably most profound and has not been talked about enough is in what's happened to our students. Not just minority students, but every student who's had to go through a Zoom classroom, who at some key point in his, her, or their career is now kind of figure out what it is they do with what will come after we have sounded the all clear. It becomes very evident that there is still work to be done. Dr. Gordon, I'm glad you've decided to keep at it because there is work to be done. There are challenges ahead. If we're going to see your vision realized, then everything that's happened with COVID-19 has got to take into account the principles, the philosophy, and the priorities that you have pursued in your own work. Your words, your thought, your vision is probably never been more relevant or more important for the moment that we as a nation are going through right now. I just want to thank you for the fact that your vision, which I think has been reflected in all of the comments people have made tonight, is one that has to continue to guide us so that we're not just looking back at the past and all the great things that you have done. We're also looking at the way in which your promise will help guide us to figure out what we have to do and what I know for education and for the entire world is going to be a very uncertain future. Dr. Gordon, thank you. There are not words that can say how much we owe you, but I think the best way to discharge the debt is to work as hard as you have worked to produce a world that you envisioned was definitely within our reach if we would simply find the will to do the job that needs to be done. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to working with you in the future. At 77, you're my inspiration. So onward and upward, Excelsior. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fullilove. Dr. Fullilove is our great colleague at Teachers College and is also the professor of socio-medical sciences at Columbia University in the Mailman School of Public Health. And it's always such a pleasure to have Dr. Fullilove with us to bring together all these disciplines in service to what we need to do next and to move forward as inspired by Dr. Gordon. Thank you again, Dr. Fullilove. I'm so happy to have with me my fellow organizers, Madhavi Chatterjee and Amy Stewart-Wells. And we would just like to close the program with some thank yous. We'd like to thank all of the participants of the whole conference over the past 2 days, which is launching, as we've said, a year-long celebration, a year-long centennial celebration of our professor. And we especially want to thank tonight's rock star lineup. Thank you all so very much for being with us. Thank you to our poet, our panelists, our friends, and especially to Dr. Gordon and his family. We want to thank Chris, Johanna, Jessica, and Ted for sharing their father with us, and to Ted for making remarks this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Amy so she can add some thank yous, and I'll be back shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you, everyone. I have the special pleasure of thanking our funders this evening, and I want to start with Naila Nasir as president of Spencer Foundation, who not only was the first funder to jump in and support this conference, but she was also one of the designers of this conference in terms of thinking of the framing and the details of the program, pushing Erica and Madhabi and me to connect the dots and make a more powerful statement with this event. And the success of this conference is very much owed to her. Thank you, Naila, for your support, your understanding, and helping us raise the funding to do this. I also want to thank Adam Gammeren and Kent McGuire and Peter Rivera from the William T. Grant Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation for jumping in quickly and following Naila's lead to support this conference and the publications that will follow that will shape the field for years to come. We also wanted to thank Walt McDonald and ETS for funding the Gordon Commission that has clearly become the intellectual basis of so much of the work that was presented here over the last 2 days. Thank you all so much for your impact on the field. And thank you, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank our TC colleagues, especially our faculty, staff, student, and alumni colleagues, all the folks who attended. I saw so many people in the chat and all the participants on panels. We are so grateful to have such wonderful colleagues at Teachers College. Thank you. We want to thank President Bailey and Provost Rowley and their offices for their support. Our events office led by Trish McNicholas that really helped us put on I think, marvelous virtual program. Our external affairs office, Jim Gardner, with a special shout out to Matt Vincent for his work on the conference website, which has all kinds of information on it, including upcoming Centennial events. Joe Levine for his research and writing, Heather Donahue for the production design, and Wachu Chen for her videography and editing a lot of our special videos. I want to thank also our virtual program producers, Soleil Estevez, who worked with us on the conference sessions, and Jose Vilson and Luis Rabito, who are working with us tonight on this closing ceremony. Thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge and thank the staff of both ARI and UME for all of their support and work, and all of the graduate students who are working with us. And I'm just going to take advantage and name them now. Jose Vilson, who I already mentioned, Xiao Shui Du, Beza Sahin Gun, Camille Way, and also Jonathan Colson and Philip Smith, who've been working with the Centennial Celebration Steering Committee. We have such wonderful students at Teachers College, wonderful students and recent alumni who have really worked with us so well on this conference, and we thank them so very much. I'm going to turn it over to Madhabi for some additional thank yous. Oh, you're on mute, Madhabi, so sorry. Oh, still muted. There we go.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Amy. My turn, it is to thank our small organizing team. That includes Erica Walker, Amy Wells, and the 4 people that she has mentioned, Xiao Shui Du, Beza Shahin Gun, Jose Wilson, and Camille Way. Now, we have been tight and working for a long time through ups and downs, because it has taken, as you can see, it takes a village, a little bit of work, but we wanted to do it for Ed. And Ed, I hope you enjoyed the program today. I hope it fulfilled your expectations, what you had envisioned. We had been in conversation for such a long time. And what about the speakers, the distinguished speakers, discussants? Yes, they said, including our amazing moderators, all of our faculty colleagues who stepped in, they all said yes at the drop of a hat, because they have been in Professor Gordon's constellation for years. And as you can see, Once you're in the Ed Gordon constellation, you become a part of his extended family. I want to say thank you also to Kenji Hakuta, because he was a part of the small working committee when we started this work. He is, of course, leading the steering committee for the Centennial events. But Kenji, thank you. You were very much a part of the conversations when we started conceptualizing the proposal with Naila and others. So thank you. And Naila, Adam, Kent and Peter, thank you for supporting our conference again. So I just want to end by saying happy birthday, Ed. Happy 100th birthday. I'm so grateful that I met you in my early years at TC, and you introduced an entirely new area of inquiry for me. And you invited me to work with the amazing people at UMI. And I met so many of these young people that are now in your mentee panel. It was a privilege for me. I remember those times. Thank you for your good works. You will always inspire us. Thank you for giving us a focus and purpose in this catastrophic year of COVID-19. We could not have had a more pleasurable distraction. And so many people suffered, but for us, we had your conference to organize, and it changed everything for us. Thanks also for pushing us, goading us just that little bit more, because now we all feel that we can do a little bit to make it a more affirming, just, and better world. Thank you, Ed. Happy birthday.
Thank you, everyone. I think that concludes our program. Thank you.